Hi, it's Tuesday and I thought I'd talk about the books that I'm thinking of reading throughout Women in Translation Month. We are now 8 days in, I think, so I will mention towards the end the books I've already read. So yeah, and I'm really looking forward to this month, reading wise. Otherwise, I'm nervous. Okay, so the list I made, and the thing is, I'm reading mostly through audiobooks. I have this app on my phone that I got thanks to thanks to being disabled. We have this app we get. We basically go to the library and say, hi, I have this and this disability. This was when I only had ADD. And I'd say most of them are made for people with who are blind or have difficulties with eyesight. So there are a lot of just audiobooks, but some are audio and some also have text, which is my So most of them are only audiobooks, but some also have text, which I prefer, because then they sort of have this way of highlighting the sentence which is read aloud, which if I want to do listening and reading, it makes it very easy to follow when I have brain fog. So I went through it thanks to my physical list of just books I've collected that seem like they fit me. Went through, okay, which of these authors are women, and just checked which existed in translation on that app. So while my first list is very, very long, it's difficult. So, my list. This is a book that has been all over BookTube, and it's we had to remove this post by Hanna Bervoets, who is a Dutch author. And it's translated by Johanna Hedenberg, and I was interested in it because it is a social media book in a way. People working there who have to watch and see, are this suitable for this site, or are they too violent, too graphic, too right wing, too, yeah, you know, the things that attracts that sort of website. And this book apparently shows how the people working there was affected by it. I think I started just reading, going through like a few pages to get the sense of the narrator's voice. So yeah, I like when it's a book that is very talked about on BookTube, that I can find on this app that is already there, because it usually takes a year or so, which means that I buy physical books, either if it's written in English, I buy them in English, or in translation, if I can't read the language. So yeah, that's the first one, looking forward to it. The second one is Intimacies by Kitamura, translated by Cecilia Franklin, and it's an American author with descents in Japan, and I can't remember what it was about, but it seemed really interesting. So yeah, this was the thing that really caught me. It was also a book that Hanna talked about. An interpreter has come to Hague to escape New York and work for the International Court. A woman of many languages and identities, she's looking for a place to call home. So yeah, the translation part of it really interests me. The political part of a place like Hague Courts really interests me, as someone who has a bachelor's in political science. She is drawn into simmering personal dramas. Her friend Jana witnesses a seemingly random act of violence, a crime the interpreter becomes increasingly obsessed with as she befriends the victim's sister. That's a really interesting part. And she is pulled into political fires. Her work interpreting for a former president accused of war crimes become precarious as their relationship is unbound by shifting language and meaning. So language seems to be a very big part of this book, and just the fact that she translates for this person who is accused of war crimes, that's a very interesting perspective to take on in a book. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one as well. As with the last one, have to see that it is on this app. Okay, so while I generally read like literary books, weird books, I also read some like traditional genre fiction, but also like genre fiction that is in itself literary or crosses genres. That is something that I like, but I specifically like speculative fiction and science fiction and dystopias. So this one, Station 11, everybody has talked about it for years. When did it come out? Station 11, when did it come out? Okay, so it was published 2014. So for some reason, probably because I wasn't primarily reading just literary fiction, short fiction, weird fiction at that time, not genre fiction, it didn't interest me. And then you'll see with the plot of this book, I didn't want to read it during the pandemic. But it is written by Emily St. John Mandel. She is a Canadian author. It was translated by Carl Johan Lind. And it is a book about the bird flu. So yeah. So I think Jan Campbell talked about it. And the band of traveling actors and musicians called the Traveling Symphony. A band of actors and musicians called the Traveling Symphony moved through their territories, performing concerts and Shakespeare's to the settlements that have grown up there 20 years after the pandemic. Life feels relatively safe, but now a new danger looms, and he threatens the hopeful world every survivor has rebuilt. Moving forwards and backwards in time. So yeah, we will see how it is written, which is important for me. But it sounds interesting how art plays a very big part of it. We were reading in my fantasy, not mine, but where I'm a temporary in the fantasy book club, we read the Memory Theatre by Karin Tidbeck, which is a fantasy book with like ideas of time and art, and if those themes interest you, it also makes references, I'd say, to like Paradise Lost, and I would guess that she's also inspired by this book, since this one was Karin Tidbeck's book was released a couple years ago. So yeah, not really sure about it, but it is always nice to know that I will have some genre fiction in there if like the heavier stuff will be too much for my brain at the time. The next book I have on my list is Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana Enriquez, who is an Argentinian author, and it is translated from Spanish by Hanna Bervoets. So yeah, she was the author who had written Dangers of Smoking in Bed, which has been on my list for a long time. Haven't found it and had other priorities when ordering books. So yeah, let's check out the plot. I remember that it was it is a collection of short stories, which is not my preferred way of reading, because of my ADD. I find that once I'm like into the story, like I've been drawn into it as in I'm feeling I'm in the story, not into it, it will soon after end, and then I don't know what to do. Should I start a new story and just like have it happen again and again? But I was drawn into it as I was with Carmen Maria Machado, and with their sort of horror and very interesting ways of bringing forth themes and topics that are very relevant and interesting to me. So, organized crime sits side by side with the occult in Buenos Aires, a place where reality and the supernatural fuses into a strange new shapes. These acclaimed Gothic tales follow the wayward and downtrodden, revealing the scars of Argentina's dictatorship and the ghosts and traumas that have settled in the minds of people. Provocative, brutal, and uncanny. Uncanny is a word. When a book is described as uncanny, I know that it will have a bit that will interest me. So, like with the past book, it will be something in a way easier, but because it is genre fiction, is a very interesting way to do genre fiction, but difficult because it is short stories. Let's look into next book. We have Godmorning Midnight by Jean Rhys, who is a British author who grew up in Dominicana, and it was translated by Annika Pries, and it was written as early as 1939. And of course she is famous for having written White Sargasso of Sea. In my book club we read 4 classics, Jane Austen, and I didn't love it. I had difficulties with it, and in a way, it was my choice that we read that one, but I wanted to read it so I could read White Sargasso of Sea. And that one I loved. I loved her way of writing. I found it interesting because I could read about a place that I knew very little about. So yeah, and this seems to be a very difficult book, so we'll see if I will get to it. About subjects such as loneliness and despair. In 1930s Paris, where one cheap hotel room is very much like another, a young woman is teaching herself indifference. She has escaped personal tragedy, has come to France to find courage and seek independence. She tells herself to expect nothing, especially not kindness, least of all from men. So yeah, it has I think important subject matter, but it might feel too heavy if I have anxiety about starting work again, probably like early September. So yeah, it depends if I will get to it now. In that same way I can mention, so the next and the last book is a bit of an unexpected one, because I'd say it's this literary darling, a book that everyone seems to love, an author everyone seems to love on BookTube, at least of the ones I follow, and that is Rachel Cusk. And when people describe her writing, it seems like it's not for me, and it's not because her writing takes place mostly in the head of the character, the main character, and what she, I think she has female main characters, right? Or characters that are stand-ins of herself. Anyhow, and what is like things she experiences, conversations she overhears. God, I can't speak. And I often write myself from the perspective inside the head of the main character, so I don't mind that, but I'm trying to think which one talked about it. Was it... I think it must have been like Rebecca Eats Books, who was talking about reading Cusk and questioning whether... I think it was this book that took place abroad or like on an airplane, and like all these discussions from people around her, and she was asking if like this was somehow written down or stuff while she experienced it, Cusk, or if she like took the things she remembered and like made it bigger. And in a way that seemed so ordinary that I wasn't interested in it. But the thing was, there was this one book that I think Jen Campbell talked about. I think it was her. And there was something about that was just like, yeah, I want to read that one. About this female artist with this like small house in her yard, and these male artists that she admired so much came to stay there. And I just couldn't for the life of me remember the title, and I couldn't remember the author, and I tried to look through her like old "this is what I'm reading this month" book, and I couldn't find it, and it bothered me for months, literally. And I guess if you read this book, you know it from the way I described it. It's Second Place by her. And I just found out yesterday. I was watching a video by Books and Bow, where she, I think, talked about, it was a video where she talked, I discovered her channel so recently, so I'm just like going through everything, because her book taste is, I say, 60-70% very similar to mine, which I love finding those people. And she described that plot, and I was like, finally! So yeah, I want to read it very, very much, but it might not be a priority for this month, since it is like, yeah, you can read Rachel Cusk anytime, because everybody reads her all the time. Yeah, so those are my 6 books that are on my to-read list from... Apparently I'm doing things very difficultly for myself. I had to redo my list. It's a couple of hours earlier now, later. I was very tired after filming, so I was stupid and I watched BookTube, and I was just like on my homepage, and I saw this book on this front, on this what's it called, mini picture of the video. Anyhow, and I was like, oh god, I wanted to read this book for ages, and it is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa, who is Japanese, so it was translated from Japanese to Swedish by Vibeke Emond. And I am fascinated by dystopias, and I read a lot of that sort of books last year, and I didn't read this one because we were talking about doing it in the book club and it never happened. Excellent opportunity. So it is explained as such. This island without a name, where forgetfulness is spreading like a pandemic. Things begins to disappear from the island, but also from the people's memories. One day there are no birds.
It sounds simple, and it is, but it tastes complex.
My cat stepped on my keyboard.
This is a dinner party, this is dinner for one.
Excuse me.
It's the way that I cook chicken more often.
Family!
Unless I'm
We're
roasting
gonna
whole
have
chicken, which I
video.
love to do.
As I said, chaos video. Chaos is the king. So yeah, okay, where was we? So one day there were no birds anymore, another day there were no roses. And it is told by a young author whose editor is in danger and needs her help. And they realize that her writing can be the only way to preserve the past. And yeah, fascinates me so much. Okay, so hi again, new clothes, different day, and some camera difficulties again. And the second book is The White Book by Han Kang, which I sort of missed on my book app that it was there. So when I saw it and I realized that it was only 44 pages, I knew it had to be here, it was perfect. And so it's translated from Korean by Anders Karlsson och Jung Park. And so here is the thing, the very weird thing. I had such difficulties with finding out who had translated this book to Swedish. When I looked at the big book-selling internet sites, it didn't tell me who had translated it, which I never seen before. But so I went to the publishers, and it wasn't there either. And I just so I had to basically go through and find a review from when it was published in Swedish, and there it was. And so yeah, that's weird. And so when I read the description of it, I knew I had to read it once because it was described as a meditation on color. I love Maggie Smith's, not Maggie Smith, Maggie Nelson's Blue. For some reason I have her as Maggie Smith in my head, which is funny. And so yeah. And so the other reason that I want to read it was that it was described as a meditation on grief. and I think it was Deborah Levy who had sort of described it as a non-religious prayer text or Bible if you're going through grief. And I went through this very big period of grief 2.5 years ago, and I would love to have a text like this. So yeah, these 2 books are definitely in priority to read for this month, since these are books that I can't read in their original language. So yeah. So back to the bits that I filmed a couple of days ago. And now I thought, since we are 8 days in, I have finished 3 books by female authors that are in translation. I talk about them as quickly and shortly as I can. Quickly and short as I can. Yeah. So I finally finished Paradais by Fernanda Melchor, and it was translated by Hanna Bervoets. And I talked about it in my first video, and the plot is this thing of 2 boys. It takes place in a gated neighborhood most of the time, where we follow this one boy who's the main character, who is very, very poor, lives outside of it, but works in that area as a yard worker basically. And he is abused in some ways, but hates his mother, he hates the cousin who lives there, and they have a very complicated relationship. He hates that he sees that he has no future, he hates the family who left him, and he befriends this other boy who lives there in that gated community. He is obsessed with this woman, and in a way that he wants to own her, and in a way that he sees that he owns her, or that he must own her, that he must claim her. And so it takes place in this way of in the mind of this poor boy, his thoughts and hatred of his life, and in the conversation where he just numbly listens to this other boy and his sexual vile obsession with the woman. And I had to stop and take a break when they decided to do something quite heinous. And so I think just a couple of days ago I took that book up and just finished it. It was amazing. It really, really affected me, obviously. There was especially, I won't talk what the heinous act was. I think the way it was done and the ending was done was quite clever. But there was this particular sentence that really got to me, where after this had taken place, this act, he thinks that he wants to be free. and there are so many ways you can interpret that, but I think the thing that just like got me was I interpreted it as he hadn't thought of it in that way before, which is very, very sad. So it is a lot about patriarchy and toxic masculinity, obviously, but also about like class struggles and capitalism and like, yeah. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Like, if you feel like you can handle it, read it, but there are so many like trigger warnings for that book. So yeah, the second one was a book I think I mentioned that I started, and that is Hot Milk by Deborah Levy, and it was translated by Eva Åsefelt, and I hadn't read anything from her before, Deborah Levy, and it really got to me. It has themes of disability to do with this. It is about this girl, this young woman, and her mother, who is disabled, or can be interpreted as not disabled, because she herself sees that she can't walk. She's paralyzed, but she can sometimes walk, and sometimes she has feelings in her legs, and every medical test is normal, which if you have similar diagnosis as me can be triggering. If you have experienced medical trauma, can be triggering, because I would say that it mainly says that because it is a book that doesn't really say that she is disabled. We are told so many times in this book that the daughter is her mother's legs. She carries her pain, and in that way it is very much about dysfunctional families. The daughter doesn't have very much of a life. She does everything for her mother. There's this repeated thing that she can't get the mother the right type of water. She gets her mother water with bubbles, and she says it's wrong. Without bubbles, and it's wrong. In a bottle, and it's wrong. You can interpret that as everything the daughter tries to do or do for her mother is wrong. And I think the way Levy describes dysfunctional families feels very hitting and feels very true and difficult, despite not doing it in a way that is too heavy. It is they go to this miracle doctor, basically. This doctor who is said to be amazing, take out a very big loan to go to Spain to see him. So yeah, but the thing I also very much liked was this theme of monster. The daughter is seeing herself as a monster, This relationship she made with a girl there who might see her as a monster, or just in the view of the girls, in their own girl's eyes. There are jellyfishes, I assume they are, in the water that are called medusas. There are mentions of the Medusa as in the woman in the Greek myth, who herself is a monster, who if she looked at a man, he would turn to stone or something like that. I haven't read that particular one in very many years. And she had snake for hairs, or depending on which story you read. And I very much like that. So depending on how you feel in regards to the themes of disability and your own experience of medical trauma, read it or not. I very much loved it though. And the last one, which I started just a few days ago and finished yesterday, was Sweet Days of Discipline by Fleur Jaeggy. Maybe. I'm not familiar with that pronunciation. It's a Swiss author. She wrote in German, and it's translated by Viveke Melander. So it's about a young girl who lives in this Swiss elite, I'd say, boarding school, and separate from her family who lives in Brazil, and she meets this girl, Frederick, at the school, who she becomes obsessed with, has a crush on. You can interpret it in, but this other girl, Frederick, she basically has this wall up, and she slowly only lets the other girl in some. There are interesting parts where we are mentioned that there is a girl there where the parents can't afford the extortionate price, so she has to work at the school. So it very much has to do with class. But the thing that I found very interesting was how it depicted childhood, but mainly I'd say girlhood. The way I viewed the book was how it looked at girlhood from both the sides we all loved and the problematic sides, because we live in a society that is a patriarchy, where everything female is viewed as slightly negative compared to masculinity. We have the pick-me girl, we have cool girl, we have all of that, which is viewed as a better way to be a woman, unless you are a very subservient woman. There are two like scenes I say in the book that really got me, and it was towards her end of the stay at this school, and the girl starts leaving, and they get picked up in these limousines, and the people who run the schools just hope that their famous and like very powerful parents will come and pick them up so they can be associated with them. And I say the thing that almost got to me the most was the last half hour of the book. I think it was around 3 hours. And I won't say what happens, but it was very interesting. That's a very like nothing way of describing it, but I almost have to like listen to it again to see how she does it, but because it's so mysterious in a way. It's gothic. It's in a completely other way from how it is otherwise. And I also, because one of the themes that I saw was girlhood, the time in the school, the visuals I had to it was almost like that of virgin suicides, the sort of the colors of that. So yeah, that are all the books that I have read in August, and the plans I have for August as it has to do with reading and Women in Translation Month. We can only hope that I will have a good reading month. So that is it for this video. I will come with updates on what I have read later on in August. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this as someone who don't do a TBR. This is it. Bye!